What's an argument that you lost because the other person was too dumb to understand your logic? Guy once told me he was speeding on his motorcycle one night in the freezing cold and was almost caught by a police helicopter with an infrared camera. He said he ditched the copter by taking his coat off and cooling his body down to ambient temperature so the infrared camera couldn't see him. I ignored the fact that he'd be dead if his body temp dropped that much and simply asked why they couldn't pick up the heat from the engine. He said infrared cameras only pick up heat from organic sources. At this point I decided against even trying to argue against any of the ridiculous points he was trying to make and just noped right out of the conversation. You should always drive as fast as possible to get the best miles per gallon. Driving twice as fast cuts your travel time in half and cuts your gas usage in half as well. Why it's not cheaper to buy a new $1,200 phone on a 24-month payment plan than to fix a phone that's paid off with a broken screen. $150. My co-worker thinks that police radar guns work by scanning cars to see how hot their engine is. Because the faster you go, the hotter it will be, right? I tried explaining how Doppler radar works, but she remains convinced that she's correct because, and I quote, "My husband has one of those radar guns and uses it when he's cooking on the grill. Your husband has an infrared thermometer, you nut." AI I knew in high school insisted Hawaii was in the Gulf of Mexico because that's what it showed on the map. He even opened our textbook to show and then looked at me like I was an idiot. I just told him to educate everyone he could then. I did not get credit in a game of Trivial Pursuit for my guess of King Tutankhamun. The correct answer was, yep, you guessed it, King Tut. I was like 13 and we had just done an Egypt study in school. So I was positive about being correct and pretty proud for knowing it. Guy said that I could touch a black hole because they only targeted stars and planets. I wanted to die. I was trying so hard not to laugh. In high school football, the night before a game, we would get together and set goals for the game. Defense set the goal of more than 200 total yards of offense allowed. I corrected the more than sign to a less than sign to make it less than 200 yards. They disagreed adamantly and kept the greater than. I was tutoring 4 of them in math at the time. They also hit their goal, more than 200 yards given up. Was trying to ask my neighbors to shut their dogs up at night because we can't sleep, but my dogs never bark. There they are, barking in the background. SMH and walk away. A guy argued that a baby grand piano was for little children during their earliest piano lessons, saying that's why they are called baby grands. I explained that the term baby grand simply refers to the smallest size of a grand piano, about 4 feet 5 long. He just insisted that baby grands were for little children, and that's why they are called baby grands. One of my college teachers gave us a test on computer hardware. One question was, what is the most important part of any computer? It was multiple choice. CPU, memory, motherboard, PSU. I told him that the question made no sense. All of the parts are necessary. No one is most important. Without anyone, the computer would not work. He insisted that it was the CPU. I'm a bartender. When I put a drink up to be run to a table in the restaurant, the servers have to put a garnish on depending on the drink. I see new guy standing there staring at the lemons. Ask him what the deal is, and he responds, "These limes aren't ripe yet." Try to explain that's not how that works and guy tells me I don't have to be an a-hole. Suffice to say we've lowered our standards for servers lately. A guy I used to work with believed that germs were a myth. He thought bad air is what made you sick. We worked in a meat department. Luckily he would wash his hands and keep stuff clean, but his logic was dirty things make bad air. I tried so hard to convince him germs were real, to the point I would print off literature of various educational levels, from kindergarten to college level, and he believed it was all a hoax. It drove me up a wall. He also believed the moon landing was fake. We got in heated arguments over it, to the point my boss put a ban on discussing the moon at all. In response to the previous post, the problem these people have is they inherently distrust science because they can't themselves validate it. You're just believing what they say, they'll state with a smirk, as if that settles it. They'll drive cars without understanding how it works though, and they always take an elevator without bothering to understand the technology that makes them work. If you actually try though, you can verify a lot of this stuff. Sometimes as a layperson with very little technical or scientific knowledge, depending on the experiment. But they never ever do those basic validations. They just try to blast you for trusting textbooks. They don't notice that they're doing the same faith-based belief in reverse. They didn't try to invalidate what the textbooks say and are just taking it on faith that you can't believe them. I was trying to explain to my roommates that we can't leave our front door unlocked 24/7, especially when no one is in the apartment and when they're out and I'm sleeping, and that they should replace the keys they lost. Plus we're on a college campus where theft is pretty common and my room was broken into the previous year. We live on a college campus so we're safe. What good is a locked door going to do if someone comes in with a gun? If something happens, that's just life. We went around in circles for 27 minutes. Worst argument ever. Whenever I use words my mother never heard of and tells me to correct myself, I now have to actually get Google definitions to show her I'm not speaking nonsense, cause I used to always lose those because she's the mom and older, therefore she knows more than me. I pointed out that his car mirrors were tinted blue. I just thought it was interesting. He got really offended, and when we actually looked at them to prove my point, he said one of the most baffling things I've ever heard: the mirrors aren't tinted, reality is. I once was innocently commenting about something on the news about the Pope. The idiot guy I was dating was like, "Hey, I don't want to hear about those stupid Christians. You can't trust any of them." I'm like, name your Lutheran, aren't you? Him, yeah, exactly. That's why I try to avoid Christians and their ads. 20-minute conversation as I tried to explain to him what a Christian was and that he was one. Didn't understand / believe. Turned into a breakup conversation for realizing how dumb he was. When I was working waiting tables, they changed scheduling systems and the times printed were in military time. My shift said I started at 10:50, so that is when I show up, 10:50 AM. At the end of my shift, my manager hands me a write-up to sign for being late. I refused because I was there at my scheduled time, 10:50 AM. He then tried to tell me I was supposed to be in at 10:30. This is when I go and grab the paper schedule and point to where it says 10:50, clearly written. At this point I start to notice that all of the start times were either at the top of an hour, 1 o'clock, 1300 hours, etc., or at the hour and 50 when making the schedule. He thought that 50 in military time was a half hour and would not listen to me when I explained as clearly as I could that it was the hours that changed, not the minutes. He still put that right up in my file. Stupid a-hole. They kept insisting that they were entitled to their opinion over something that was a fact. For some reason, telling her that her opinion didn't sway the truth just made her double down. Situation: I mentioned that a certain YouTube personality was gay. I said it matter-of-factly, not to be mean. The guy has mentioned being gay on his channel several times. This girl got mad and kept denying he was into dudes. This was despite me pointing out that he openly identified as gay. She cited that it was her opinion to validate the dude's sexuality on what her stupid ass wants to believe. I'll be finishing up my history degree in a few months. I really shouldn't be arguing my subject with people who've never had a reason to pick up a history book, but I was stuck with a buddy of mine for several hours a day for the better part of last year, and we got around to talking about pretty much everything. At one point, for one reason or another, we got to talking about the Comanche Indians. I mentioned a common misconception, and he countered with a stereotype that he learned in grade school. We went back and forth for a while, and I tried to reference books on the topic, but his response was always to restate the same stereotype and say I'm part Cherokee, so I know. Eventually, when he clearly had nothing left to say, he asked the most annoying question possible in that situation. Yeah, well, were you there? How do you even respond to that? I definitely wasn't there, but neither was anyone else alive today, and accepting that argument would pretty much void all study of history. I pretty much gave up. He's not a dumb guy, but history is clearly not his field, and there was no way anything was gonna come of the argument. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, do all the YouTube things and I'll see you all tomorrow.